My name is Mary Sketch, and I am with the Virginia Soil Health Coalition and Virginia Tech and Virginia Cooperative Extension, and I am for the soil.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of For the Soil, a conversation. I'm your host, Jeff Ishee. Dr. Eric Bendfeldt will be joining us in just a few moments with a special guest to talk about a very unique, shall I say, a very unique topic, but we're all familiar with this topic, I suspect, and we'll get to that topic in just a moment. But I did want to remind everyone that Tuesday, December the 5th, is World Soil Day, and we have a special podcast lined up for that day, and we'll share some details about that with you between now and December the 5th. Once again, December the 5th is World Soil Day. Now to this week's podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of For the Soil, a conversation. I'm your host, Jeff Ishee, and joining me today as co-host, Dr. Eric Bendfeldt with Virginia Cooperative Extension, Community Viability. Eric, it is now fall, and there's a lot of activities going on farms, also in backyards with lawns. There's a lot of things taking place, and that is our topic today. Would you do the honor of introducing our guest today?
Yes, Jeff, we're very pleased to have with us Dr. Mike Goatley. Mike, Turfgrass Extension Specialist and researcher at Virginia Tech, and he's been there since 2004. And I think, certainly the interest in soil health, environmental stewardship, conservation, and as you and I were speaking a little bit before the show, the interest in drought tolerance, drought resilience. So really wanted to have a conversation with Mike to learn from his experience and expertise. So welcome, Mike.
My pleasure to be here. Thank you all for having me.
And Mike, if you could give us a little bit about your background and specifically, how did you get inspired and influenced to go into research and education about turfgrass management?
Purely accidental. I was majoring in ag economics at the University of Kentucky. Couldn't make a dime in any of our simulations, making straight A's in class and blowing every possible means of the early days of computer and investing. And my advisor said, I don't know if this is going to work for you. Keep trying. And he said, just as per chance thing, why don't you take this turfgrass management class at UK as an elective? You're going to like this guy because I like to play golf, knew all the sports and everything. And from that point on, Eric, I took that one class. I knew the first day I took it, I finally found something that a country boy from a beef cattle, Burley tobacco farm that was looking not to work so hard and do something else ag related. I stumbled into turf, went through the program at UK, came to Virginia Tech, got a PhD here, did 15 years at Mississippi State University, and then returned to become a turfgrass faculty member at Tech in 2004. So quite by accident, but the best accident that ever could have happened to me.
Well, thank you, Mike. I had another question. When we think about Virginia, I'm located in Rockingham County. We're in the Chesapeake Bay watershed. We also have the southern rivers. If you could let our listeners know just the extent and expansiveness of lawn and turfgrass within Virginia.
This is a great state for people that work in turfgrass research to do business in, because we're transition zone. And what that means in the world of turfgrass is we can grow 8 different grasses not very well. So no matter where you are, something is going to struggle. And what we're constantly in the battle for is identifying what is the best possibility, because there is no slam dunk. There are best choices than others. But when you range from Shenandoah Valley all the way to the Atlantic Ocean, we can have those 8 different grasses that we can possibly grow in Virginia. That's one of our biggest challenges.
And what would be those grasses, Mike? And
in the cool season world, by far and away, the largest acreage cool season turf grass is turf type tall fescue. many people are familiar with the old Kentucky 31 forage grass, which still is one of the leading seed sales for turfgrass use, probably internationally. But generally speaking, that grass grows so fast due to its genetics that most people don't want to use in a lawn because they don't like cutting the turf that much. So that's kind of our standard in the cool season world. We also grow Kentucky bluegrass, which is one of the prettiest, darkest green grasses that we grow in the entire United States. But a lot of people don't like the maintenance inputs that grass requires. Perennial ryegrass is an option for us. Fine leaf fescues in the cool season world are the best for the shaded conditions, low input turf. And then we go over to the warm season world across the state. Bermuda grass, whether it's what's called common Bermuda, which can be established from seed, or the vegetative hybrids, which are the type that they use on athletic fields and golf courses. Those are the fastest growing grasses that we have, but they are also one of our biggest weeds. And so, Eric, when I hear people talking about wiregrass, I'm like, that's just another name for Bermuda grass when you don't want it. And it's one of our major weeds in cool season lawns. Zoysia grass, one of my favorite warm season grasses, extremely cold hardy. St. Augustine, almost exclusively to the coast of Virginia, and centipede grass, which kind of starts showing up about south side to the coast, a very low input turf that I recommend quite frequently for using in cemeteries and very low input management situations in our warmest climate. So that would be 8 different things that we can all grow not very well.
Mike, it's a real pleasure to have you on this episode, and it's been a number of years since you and I have talked, but as we mentioned before the episode started today, during COVID, I developed a new hobby because I have spending so much time at home, and I suspect a lot of our listeners develop new hobbies with gardening and lawn maintenance, and that new hobby for me was lawn care. And I'm glad you mentioned the phrase transition zone. I think that happens in my front yard here in Augusta County. I've got about probably 5 different types of grass, from tall fescue to Bermuda. And you mentioned Bermuda as kind of a weed. I'd never heard it defined like that, but I can understand, because a weed is essentially a plant growing where you don't want it to grow. I'd rather have tall fescue in my lawn, but it's so interesting to have you on the show today and talk about transition zones and turf types. Here in Virginia, we have such a diversity of turf types.
Yeah, and I laughing to myself when you talk about your Bermuda grass. One of the most common lawns that I see as I travel Virginia is what we somewhat sarcastically call, but realistically call Fesmuda, because fescue and Bermuda grass combinations are prevalent in much of our climate. And there's even been research done by a former colleague at University of Kentucky showing that sometimes you can make these perennial 2-grass systems actually coexist, but that's one of those things that on paper it sounds good. In practice, it's a challenge, but Mother Nature is going to constantly change the winners and losers in our lawns in Virginia because of these extremes that we have in summer and winter, and then the variability that we get with our moisture. You know, with this year being so much drought statewide, well, Bermuda grass has exploded in many people's lawns, and it's actually looking great right now. And the biggest reason more people don't use warm season grasses, particularly the cold tolerant species, is no one likes that brown color. They can live with those trees dropping those leaves, but you can't live with a lawn that has no color. So that's always one of the strange horticultural aspects of brown lawns isn't good, but trees without leaves is acceptable.
I'm glad you mentioned winners and losers, because I've been fighting a battle, and I'm thinking that in my mind is we have winners and we have losers. And one of the plants that I want to see succeed and win, if you will, is clover. I have a small orchard on my property, about 9 or 10 fruit trees, and I know that the pollinators need clover. And so I never, ever, ever spray anything on the turf in my orchard. And I see so many homeowners that want a 100% uniform stand of turf, and they try to eliminate clover. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's an it depends situation. There is absolutely nothing wrong with clover. Clover was a primary component of our seed mixtures that we used back in the 1940s before synthetic fertilizers became so economical and so readily available. And the ability of the clover to fix the nitrogen and to serve the pollinators that you suggest is going to mean there's always a place for clover in the lawn. So I'll straddle that fence and tell you if that's what you like as a lawn, that makes perfect sense to me. Eric and I were talking before this podcast began that one of our challenges is to introduce it into lawns. It's probably not as easy as we wish it to be because whatever is existing is just super competitive with the seedling plant that's trying to capture that space. So one of the ways that we've been successful in introducing clover into, and the work that I did previously was in cool season turf, was we scalp it down in the spring. We violate every principle of smart mowing with the purpose of we got to give the clover a chance to germinate and get established. So it's one of those, if that's what you like as a homeowner, Jeff, I think more power to you. For others that say, I really don't want that, I like that uniformity. In the Goatley household, a wife who is hypersensitive to bee stings has meant that in terms of me having a lot of clover in the lawn has typically not been something that I would prefer. But at the same time, I'll also tell you, I'm most proud not of my turf, but of my perennial beds and all my flowers. So I do still end up having plenty of bees around my property serving the purpose of pollinator plants with my perennials.
And Mike, we've been emphasizing 4 core soil health principles, keeping the soil covered, minimizing disturbance, maximizing living roots, and energizing with diversity or maximizing biodiversity. Could you speak to that from a turfgrass perspective, and also be interested in hearing your perspective on mowing or mower deck and cutting heights as well?
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
And they, what you just mentioned, Eric, are kind of the forgotten benefits of turfgrass because we talk about, the beauty, the aesthetics of turfgrass and the playability of turfgrass on golf courses and athletic fields. But the things we take for granted are the real value of turfgrass for society, and that is soil stabilization, erosion control. And we've got different species that will germinate from seed quite quickly. And we see this all over the state of Virginia in the selection of plant materials that they use, say, for highway vegetation established when they're trying to stabilize those slopes. We can use sod, which immediately provides a filter system to stabilize soil. And then other factors of the turf grass that we take for granted is its ability to filter the water that's moving through, as well as to moderate temperature. And one of the ways to manage the healthiest turf possible, a unique feature of turf grass is its ability to be clipped with a mower. You can walk on it. To some level, you can put a lot of traffic on it, but we watch people they keep mowing it far too short. So in general, if we can get people to raise their mowing deck, I like to see on our cool season grasses, typically 3 inches or higher. If your mower deck will go higher. And that's one of our challenges, is that many of our mower decks aren't designed to go taller than that. And it's purely a safety feature. They don't want the discharge where something can be thrown. But the taller you can mow turf, the deeper the root system you're going to have, the less pest and environmental stress that you're going to have. And that's probably, from a maintenance standpoint, one of the first factors that I see commonly violated. People mow their grass far too short.
We're talking today with Dr. Mike Goatley. He is a professor and turfgrass specialist at Virginia Tech. And our topic of discussion is lawn care, turf management, and soil health. And in the remaining minutes that we have about 4 minutes remaining, Dr. Goatley, and love to talk about resources. Of course, I automatically think of my local extension office and the Master Gardener program. But what other resources, including those, are available to our listeners if they have questions about soil health in their lawns?
Well, through the Virginia Cooperative Extension webpage, you will see a huge number of different extension publications that have been produced by both by my predecessors and myself and my current colleagues. And one of the areas, Jeff, in which we're really trying to get some hits, some feedback from the public is we produced 8 videos in what we called the Calling Dr. Turf series, a spinoff of an old Kiss song from the 1970s that was about calling Dr. Love. We made it Calling Dr. Turf. We tried to use humor. My son said you might have succeeded or failed, depending on your perspective, but these are for homeowners and some basic common sense strategies that we really want people to take a look at, because we tried to take it to the level of, I can understand that, all the basic principles about timing, what grass to choose, taking soil tests, how do I apply fertilizer without knowing how to calibrate a spreader? You'll see all those types of things there. So there's a whole host of things available on the Extension website.
Thank you, Mike. And one question, too, if you would have one piece of advice, particularly in trying to make your lawn or turf grass area more resilient to drought. I think Jeff was sharing how the Shenandoah Valley's in extreme drought condition right now. What would that advice be, Mike?
Well, your whole title of your podcast series, this starts with the soil and having a healthy soil. We need folks to utilize the data they get back from a soil test, and we tell people in a lawn setting to take a soil test every 3 to 4 years. And one of the things that we do that quite often is kind of like an unknown in the world of turf is I'm always recommending to people to improve soil health by making a compost application. And I'm a huge fan of an annual application of about a 1/4 inch depth of compost into a lawn. It's a phenomenal means of improving soil health by basically making the microbes that live in the soil happier, the turf grass root system happier, everything in that soil benefits from that compost application. And the final thought is when you're in the middle of a drought on a turf grass system, grasses evolved in climates that really didn't get that much rain. And so the take-home message is basically leave it alone. Stay off of it. If you're going to irrigate, that tells me you're committing to irrigating. If you're not going to put the water on, just stay off of it. And 9 times out of 10, that lawn is going to recuperate whenever the water returns.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. And I've still got a lot of questions. I think we're going to invite you to stay tuned and come back for a second episode, because I've got a lot of questions, and I'm sure that our listeners probably have questions also. Speaking of resources, would you recommend that people call their local extension office if they have a specific question for you?
By all means, and the way that it will work is you start there at the local office, and many times my agent colleagues who just blow me away by the diversity that they have to, of topics they have to know, they'll probably know the answer, but if they don't, that's where the role of a specialist comes in. That what I do is 24/7. I work in the world of turf grass science. So that's the best way for all of us to get our situations best met.
And we haven't even mentioned armyworms. So, yeah, you're going to have to come back for a second episode. Our guest today has been Dr. Mike Goatley, professor and turfgrass specialist at Virginia Tech. And Dr. Bendfeldt, we will see you in the next one.
Thank you so much, Mike and Jeff.
For the Soil, a Conversation is made possible with funding support from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation and the Agua Fund. Other partners include the USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service, Virginia Cooperative Extension, Virginia State University, Virginia Department of Conservation and Recreation, and partners of the Virginia Soil Health Coalition. Views expressed on this podcast are those of each individual guest. To download a copy of this or any other episode, visit the website forthesoil.org. And if you should have a specific question about soil health, call your local extension office, your local USDA service center, or a soil and water conservation district office. Music used during today's program was provided courtesy of Mr. Ruiz. All rights reserved. For the Soil, a Conversation is produced by On the Farm Radio in collaboration with Virginia Tech. I'm your host, Jeff Ishee.